I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're talking to a terrific author by the name of Stephen Reger, and he has penned a powerful book. It is called Stormfall, Book 3 of the Stormsong Trilogy. It is the thrilling conclusion to the trilogy that brings an end to the journey that the Stormsong sisters began 2 years earlier. As the 30 Years' War continues to rage and threaten beyond the borders of the Holy Roman Empire, the sisters face a power far greater than any man-made war. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his wonderful books. The links are below this interview. Steve, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
It's my pleasure, and if I'm fortunate enough that the books ever become a movie, your intro could be the voiceover for the movie trailer. That was great.
That sounds great. In a world where Stormfall,
right.
There we go.
Perfect.
Well, I appreciate that, my friend. Let's give the folks at home an overview of the last book of the trilogy, Stormfall.
Okay. Well, as you said, within the Holy Roman Empire, the trilogy is playing out over a 2-year time span. The first book began in 1618 when the war began. This third book, we're now into 1620, so just a tiny sliver of this 30 Years' War. But the two main characters are now kind of coming full circle from, at the beginning of the first book, being complete strangers, having no idea that they were half-sisters, to now having reconciled that fact, but now searching for further truth and the mysteries behind their father. And the war continues to escalate, and their kind of personal relationship continues to escalate and spiral as the war does. So we're now building to kind of like the big climactic encounter between the sisters and the person that they believe to be their father.
Wonderful, wonderful. What made you decide to create a series of novels based in this time period?
It really didn't start that way. The original idea I had, and bizarrely enough, the idea came to me while I was cutting the grass in our backyard. The main character, Lady Vanessa von Stormstrong, she was originally, in my head, she was going to be kind of a female ripoff of Van Helsing, the classic vampire hunter. And I thought, okay, what if we had kind of a female Van Helsing in a world with a female Robin Hood character, kind of taking these two, and that's the genesis of Charlottova. And the more I kind of played with it, and I actually started to write a little bit of, I thought, you know what, these characters are kind of interesting. I don't want to rip off an existing character. They're kind of developing their own voice. They're kind of developing their own character. So Vanessa, Lady Atlantis, Vanessa von Stormstrong, she kind of developed from that Van Helsing character into something much more complicated. And Charlottova, she kind of stayed true to her roots. She's got this kind of Robin Hood, steal from the rich, give to the poor mentality. But it was originally going to be in Victorian England, was my original plan. And then it just, I blame it on my German roots. My family is all German. It just came to me, well, why not put it in a time and a place? It's very Germanic. And the beauty of that is practically nobody knows anything about the 17th century Holy Roman Empire or the 30 Years' War. So it's really free to kind of do whatever I want, because there weren't going to be a lot of people calling me out on it and saying, well, that's not really how it played
Didn't exactly unfold like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, you're a former high school history teacher, right? So writing historical fiction is kind of right up your alley, right?
Yeah. And that was really the kind of the idea behind it. Is once I retired, the teaching bug was still there, but I wanted to try to teach in a new way, maybe more creative, more interesting. And this has allowed me to, I've always had a passion for writing. I, of course, have a passion for history. That's why I taught it for 30 years. I'm also, and our family is very passionate about scripture and about teaching the Bible. And by putting it in the Holy Roman Empire, which is a religious civil war, it allows me to do all of that. I can teach history. I can bring forth scripture. It scratches the writing itch. It was just a great combination of three different passions of mine. So it's a trite phrase, but it was a labor of love.
Absolutely. Now, this must have been a great labor of love because you put together 3 volumes in this story.
Yes.
Now that it's finished, do you feel like, what do I do next? Or are you toying with a prequel or yet another sequel? Tell us about that.
Well, actually, both are in the works. There will be a prequel at some point. There will be a follow-on trilogy at some point. But in between the second book and the third book, I took some time off to write something different. I wrote another novel called Our New Old Enemies, which was very short, very fun. Now that the first trilogy is done, I want to take some time away before I start the prequel or the follow-on sequel. What I'm working on now is completely different. It's a modernized and fictionalized retelling of the 1920s Sacco and Vanzetti case, which in the 1920s, it was the original trial of the century, long before, OJ or Donald Trump, or we feel like we have a trial of the century every couple of years now. So I'm a couple chapters into that, and it's completely different from anything I've written to this point, but I'm excited about that one too.
It sounds great. Do you have a working title for that?
Yes, it comes from a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and the title is Any Better or Greater Hope. And the idea that Lincoln was saying in the quote was, is there any better or greater hope for humanity than human beings themselves? Like, if we're ever going to succeed as a society, or if we're ever going to fail it's going to be because of everyday ordinary citizens. So the idea behind this book is, would the Sacco and Vanzetti case, which most historians consider a travesty of justice, would that in 2024, would it play out any differently, or would the outcome be the same?
Yeah. People would be tweeting and making TikTok videos about it, so it would be a little different. Whether that influenced the outcome of the trial, who knows?
Yes.
We teased it a little bit in the intro that the sisters face a power far greater than any man-made war. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. As I was working on the trilogy, I knew there was a risk of a history teacher telling a historical story that could come across a little bit dry. And I didn't want it to read like nonfiction. So I wove an element of low fantasy into the story. I've always been a big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin. I didn't want to go to that level. I didn't want dragons and elves, and those writers are much more talented than I am, and I just didn't think I could handle that. But I wove an element of low fantasy into it. So the family name Stormsong is also an ability. Both of the sisters discover through these novels that through the use of song, they have the ability to control the elements. So it is literally a storm song. They have no idea just how powerful they're capable of being until this third act, until Stormfall, which, it's somewhat ominous. There's going to be some darkness to this, when they have no idea the root of this power or just how far it can go.
Wonderful, wonderful. Very original, very creative, and a great device for your story.
Thank you.
Let's say Christopher Nolan gives you a call and wants to turn your series into
Please.
You've already got the voiceover guy for the opening
That's
of the
right.
movie, for the trailer.
That's right.
But have you contemplated about that at all? These are very visual books, of course, and visual stories.
Only about every other minute of the day. I fantasize about seeing it either on a big screen, so much so that I've actually kind of done some some casting in my mind. You know, I'll see something going, oh, he'd be perfect for, she'd be perfect for,
Right.
Or I would love to see it. I'm a big fan of the Game of Thrones miniseries or Shogun, which recently aired. I could see it being an 8 or 10 part miniseries. So I fantasize about that pretty much all the time. And we have two sons, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they routinely ask me, Dad, when can we go to the theater and see these movies? And my answer will be, well, never, because they're pretty adult, they're pretty sophisticated, and it's not intended for a young adult audience.
Right. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed that the word gets out there. Man, it's a beautiful thing about writing a book is that you never know whose hands it'll wind up in. So
Correct.
hopefully Christopher Nolan is on a plane somewhere reading it right now as we speak.
That would be wonderful.
Terrific. And he's visualizing exactly shot for shot how he would put it together.
And
Reger,
everybody that's on my dream cast would, of course, say yes. They'd be happy to do it. And yes.
Exactly. Well, I think to collaborate with someone like Christopher Nolan, I think you'd have no problem casting it. That's for sure.
That would be great.
Stephen Reger has written a series of 3 books. They are all terrific. The one we focused on primarily today is the 3rd installment in the Stormsong Trilogy. It is called Stormfall. It is the thrilling conclusion of the trilogy that brings an end to the journey that the Stormsong sisters began 2 years earlier. It's very creative. It's very imaginative. It's historical fiction at its best. You will love these books. Steve, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is all mine, my friend. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time until next time on Spotlight.